Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here to testify. I'm really interested in the testimony that talks about the fortress model of conservation. One of my proudest achievements in partnership with President Obama's administration and many, many others is the establishment of Papahanaumokuakea Marine Monument, and it's almost 600,000 square miles. And I worry very much that it'll be a paper monument. And so what worries me a bit about the 30 by 30 is exactly that, is that the sort of geopolitical diplomatic impetus for an announceable will cause a bunch of people to declare a bunch of things off limits and will lack sufficient resources to actually manage those terrestrial ecosystems or ocean ecosystems. And I'm just wondering how we think about, I do think we should have these goals, but I could see a scenario where we superficially meet that goal and don't actually change conditions on the ground. And so I'd like each one of you to comment on that as quickly as you can. I'll start on my right with Dr. Stier.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Senator Schatz. The political attractiveness of 30 by 30 is useful, but it is useless unless it's followed up well. And the best examples of those need to be replicated. So, for example, in the marine area, the Eastern Tropical Pacific Seascape, where 4 presidents, Ecuador, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, got together last year and they said, let's do this, let's use this 30 by 30 as a way of getting political and other momentum. What happened is a lot of us were willing to sit down with them for literally weeks to design something led by them, including by the fishing industry. And it was so cool at the Biodiversity Convention up in Montreal to see the Minister of Environment of Ecuador together with the Minister of Fisheries, which is extremely rare, announcing an expansion.
Oh, I know. When I was a freshman legislator 100 years ago, I was the vice chair of the Ocean and Marine Resources Committee, and I got the baptism in fisheries politics. So I understand what an achievement that is. And then Papahanaumokuakea, I think, is a great example of doing it right. I'd also, just before I move on to Mr. Sabunya, point out the emphasis on stakeholders who are indigenous is really important. I'm the chairman of the Senate committee that has jurisdiction called the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs that has jurisdiction over Native people across the United States. But I do want to emphasize that stakeholders are stakeholders whether they are indigenous or not. And I don't want to get into the blood quantum question or the question of whether you're a lineal descendant of the original people of a place. In all seriousness, it can become this dichotomy between indigenous and non-indigenous, just as, for example, when we established the Northwest Hawaiian Islands Marine Monument in Hawaii, we worked with a lot of the fishing community, not all of whom are Native Hawaiian. A lot of them are Japanese Americans and Filipino Americans and Caucasian Americans and all the rest of it. And so I just want to make sure that when we think about stakeholder engagement, it's not just indigenous, non-indigenous, it's anyone who's a stakeholder who may make a living doing something that is going to have to change. So, Mr. Sabunya, I actually want to ask you a slightly different question. Is there a sort of curated list of projects that were done right? Because I think that's maybe the most important thing. Rather than call out the projects that are done wrong, the model that Dr. Stier is talking about, Papahanaumokuakea is a good example, I'm sure. Across the African continent, there are examples, but I think it would be useful to the State Department and to the committee to kind of say, what's the model here and what do they all have in common? And I'm wondering if anyone has already done that work.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, there are a number of examples of projects that have done very well. And the issue now we are trying to deal with for our 60 years work in Africa is how do you scale that up at a level that is really impactful on the continent for an issue that is not only national but Pan-African, to have that high-level impact. I'll give you an example of the work we've done with the USAID in partnership with the government of Rwanda and Uganda around the Virungas, around the mountain gorillas. 4 years ago, we've been working there protecting the endangered mountain gorilla. We started by protection, that fortress idea, training rangers, park management systems, inventories of mountain gorillas. Then we started introducing tourism as an aspect to that. We, together with the USAID, we built the first high-end lodge in Rwanda and Uganda around the mountain gorillas. These 2 lodges are owned by communities. We raised the bar in terms of community participation. At that time, community participation meant getting African communities to dance for tourists or sell a few crafts, and that was called ecotourism. We built lodges with community equity in it, and then we brought in private sector as a management partner of these lodges. They still exist. The lodge in Rwanda pumps $500,000 in the rural economy in Rwanda around the mountain gorillas. Rwanda has picked, as a model, Rwanda has picked up mountain gorillas as part of their greener economies in the country as a model. Now, what have we achieved? Conservation of mountain gorillas. For the last 40 years, there's no single mountain gorilla that has been killed in both Uganda and Rwanda, except recently during the COVID, which was in self-defense. That is a very good example where we have tied the economy of the rural area people to be matched by the conservation aspects of the national park and the identification of their aspirations as a people in line with what's going on, what the ecological systems of this area is. Now we are dealing with the value chains. We are introducing bamboo economies in these areas so that people stop growing a World Bank project, which is pastoral and other agricultural products, to start growing bamboo as an agriculture economy, which is food for the mountain gorillas, but they're going to produce furniture, building materials.
It's $6 a square foot. It's a very valuable.
So that's a very, very good example of what it is, right from the national level economy to the community level economy.
Thank you, sir. My time is up. Ms. Caldwell, I'll reduce my question for you to writing and submit it for the record. Thank you very much.